Blow-Me-Down farm was acquired by the National Park Service, Saint-Gaudens National Historic Site, in 2010 to protect the buildings and preserve the character of the area. While the park seeks an appropriate use for the property, they are also charged with preserving it from further decay. This workshop utilizes some of the deteriorated windows in the dance hall to instruct workers in methods for preserving wood windows. Windows are a significant character-defining feature on any structure, and in order to maintain a building's integrity, it's important to retain as much historic fabric as possible. Windows are primarily made of 4 materials: the wooden sash, glass, glazing putty, and paint. The sash and glass are the primary structure, and the paint and putty are the sacrificial coatings that protect it. If a window has been neglected for too long, the paint and putty will fail completely, leaving the window structure vulnerable to decay. This is why we need to strip the sashes down to bare wood, make structural repairs, and reapply glazing compound and paint. We have to remember that any structure built before 1978 will likely have lead as a component of the paint and glazing compound. Lead paint is most hazardous when dust particulates, like from sanding painted surfaces, become airborne and inhaled or swallowed. The purpose of this video is not to teach lead abatement methods, but you should be aware of the risks before you start a project like this on your own. In order to protect workers and their families from the hazards of lead poisoning, it's important to take certain precautions when planning a paint removal project. Housekeeping practices like keeping debris vacuumed and contained, and personal hygiene practices like always removing contaminated clothing before leaving the work area are vital. For more information on protecting workers and families from lead, go to epa.gov/lead.
Usually you have a window inventory or assessment done first. And on very large jobs, they're extremely helpful because you can quickly figure out which are your worst windows and which are your best windows if you're going to phase the job. You can start with the worst ones and work back towards the ones that are in better shape. We visually inspect each part of the frame and sash, and we can mark down if they're damaged, if they need repairs, if they're missing. A lot of times on double hung sash you'll find missing parting beads or interior stops, all parts that when they're restored you're going to want to put back. You can assign a value to each of those things depending on what's most important to you, and then you can come up with a number. So say I would probably, on a scale of 1 to 3, if I have rotting joints in my bottom sash, bottom rail, I might call that a 3. That's something that needs attended to sooner than cosmetic damage in a mutton. So I can assign value to these things, and using the numbers, the higher the number, the sooner I need to get to that window. We need to take the hardware off of them. I always label from the exterior because I'm putting the glass back in from the exterior, and then I just do left to right and down the window. And if they're really dirty, then this is window 5, which they'd marked here. Just regular water, it doesn't have to be denatured.
I was looking it over. Actually took
Oh, there we go. That was just a little funny. I'm just going to do that because there it is.
How long does that usually take to do that? I mean, if it's up to prime.
If it's up to prime, it depends on the window and the glazing. In this one, I think it usually takes me about 40 minutes. 40, 45. Yeah, that's why I wanted to get it going. Some of them take more like 20. It depends on how much heat, how much steam you've got pumping into it,
right,
and the size of the box, how fast it can heat up, and how fast it can heat the sash. You do want to use the rubber gloves when you're grabbing them out, and you have to be sure you don't get a face full of steam. People have been known to get second and third degree burns opening a box when they weren't being careful. They get the glazing out. Should, for the most part, peel off depending on what kind it is, but and then find any and all points and get them out, like right there. And then we can start hopefully popping the glass out. So there. Now I'm actually using this side. I'm making sure this isn't actually dragging on the glass. Just don't want to damage the glass if possible. So I need more like a, well, I'll go back to this one for a minute and see if I can get this. Pushing is not really the best way to go, but okay, so there's a point, and there it goes. The speed heaters, ideally you want the base of the heater even with your surface. I definitely get the better surface with the heater. Smoother surface in the long run. Scraping with a carbide scraper on this is taking a fair amount of muscle. Let's try this one. And I always try all the different scrapers to see which one's the most effective. The profile, I'm part of an old saw blade, so it's tool steel. Yeah. You know, I really like these. I use them for scraping down the surface. Instead of sanding, a lot of times I'll scrape first. You know, a little bit of paint here and there if it's well adhered is not the end of the world. But in terms of lead and lead dust and poisoning, the muttons are never going to get friction rubbed. So you really aren't going to get dust off that, but if I were to take the sash to a lead inspector and ask him to approve them, I have to have every speck of paint off of them. With an orbital sander, you generally want to be on the wood when you start it. It's very hard to touch it down onto the wood and keep it flat, and if it's at an angle, you're going to put a nice groove in it. On the sash, one of the reasons I say if you're not comfortable with them, start on something else, a wider flat piece, just to learn the balance of it. Because if I sand along like this, my piece is all going to all of a sudden not be flat anymore. If you don't want to use a power sander, there's many forms of flat sanders. These come in a variety of shapes and curves. That's why I have all these little pieces of sandpaper. I can come right in with this. I can get the flat edge and the profile. And I'm knocking off some of that paint that's left. I'm really trying to just smooth up the surface and get rid of any of these little wood. Any of the wood that's been lifted up, in order that once it's painted it looks hopefully pretty good. This is the bottom of the sash, so water is running down the face. I'm going to just do this too. It'll get most of the knot. There'll be a little hole in the bottom. We can fill that with Bondo. There's no need to hug out the whole thing. So I'm just going to mark it out with the knife so I don't chip out the edges. That was a little better. this is a good use of timber framing chisels on windows. I'm just doing a rectangular patch on this. You can get into all levels of patches, trying to do them with dovetail keys so that not only is the glue holding them in, but the structure of the patchwork is also holding it in. Like everything, you can go to different, yeah, okay, that'll work, different levels. So this is West System A and B. I do buy the pumps with it. Some people don't. It's best to have the pumps. If you don't actually measure these correctly, it either won't cure or it'll cure really fast. You have to be able to dry out the rotted area. If it's not dry, the stuff's not going to take.
Now your rot will keep going.
And the rot will keep going. So the first thing is to get access to all of it. Usually you drill a series of holes. Some people pour in denatured alcohol to help drive off the moisture, and then you pour this stuff in. So this one was cleaned down following the processes we've used in the last 2 days, and then I oiled the whole thing with the heated boiled linseed oil. The boiled linseed oil we consider the primer. The oil conditions the wood, gives it where it may have dried out some, it's going to give it a little more structure because it's putting oil back into the system. The shellac I'm just doing on the rabbets because that's the only place I want to seal. What I don't want happening when I put the glazing in is that the oil is being drawn out of the glazing by the wood. It'll dry it out and it'll fail. So the shellac is to seal just that part. We're going to start cleaning glass while we're finishing with the shellacking. So we're missing 2 pieces of glass. I'm going to cut new pieces for those 2 openings. This is modern glass. Most of these I think are all modern glass. They're all later replacements. We aren't worrying about putting nice wavy glass in. Some really good glass cutters can actually just lay it over top and follow the edge. I'm not that good. I need a straight edge to cut along. So I'm just marking my margins. You're just trying to score an even line. And that is not very even after that, but
It's not like somebody can pick it up.
oh, well, there we go. That was enough to grab. Okay, now we're ready to move on. The next step is to bed the glass. You want a good solid seal the whole way around. What you're trying to do is make a continuous weather-tight seal between the glass and the window frame. The next step is to get the glass set down. You can just do it by hand. I've had a lot of guys break glass doing that because they start pushing too hard and there's anything uneven and they end up pushing over that, it breaks. If you have an old palm sander around that you're never going to use again and you're thinking about throwing out, I love it for this. So it just vibrates and sets it down nice. Where it's got the high points, it's not going to push it down. You're not putting any pressure on it, you're just letting it do its thing. Then I peel the extra out because we still have to wedge the glass in place. These can move around side to side and up and down. If they're not wedged, and historically all of the glass I've been pulling out lately has been wedged because they were using the softer glazing compounds. Generally you want to use a softwood, and I've just developed a method of having a thin piece of wood nearby that I can slice up into little pieces to get in there. If you don't want to do this, you can actually glaze it flat, leave it flat for 2 weeks, and then they aren't going to move around. Should be enough on this size. Those then usually don't set deep enough, so I can tap them in. You want the points set so that they're inside this rabbet. So when you glaze, you want that glazing bead to be inside that rabbet, and you want the metal points to be completely covered. Once I have the points in, and You want to clean all the excess glazing on the inside up so that when you are glazing you can actually see where that rabbet is. Also at this point I'm going to clean, every time the glazing hits the glass it leaves oil behind. So I kind of, I'll say it, obsessively clean my glass while I'm glazing. You see, I like a flexible knife because I like to have a whole lot of pressure on it.
These strips of chalk?
Yes. It's the same stuff that's in the glazing compound, the calcium carbonate. It just absorbs the oil and cleans it up. But that's glazing. I do one coat of paint on the exterior as soon as I've glazed. Then in 2 days I flip it over, do a coat on the interior, and then one more coat on each side after that. That's it.